The art and legacy of Louisiana's beloved blue dog painter George Rorigue are on view at the West Baton Rouge Museum in a rare opportunity to see several works from his private collection. It's been 10 years since the artist's death, and his widow Wendy Rodrigue is keeping the memory and mission of George Rorigue alive by sharing his art with school children around the state. Here's more. Many of the George Rorigue paintings hanging on the walls of the West Baton Rouge Museum are rare sights from the private collection of his widow Wendy, on loan as part of a retrospective of Rodrigue's work themed "The River is the Road."
And the river is one of those elements that links all of Rodrigue's paintings through. So I thought about that. George as a little boy on the banks of the Bayou Teche, the river leading us through to this bright hope, as you'll see in so many of these paintings. The end of the river, or is it a road? And how does that translate to the journey of life and the journey of George's life in particular, but also hopefully for people who visit this, maybe it will resonate some for their own lives.
Wendy Rodrigue, widow of the famed blue dog painter George Rorigue, is filled with emotion as she talks about her late husband's work as a chronicler in canvas of Louisiana's culture, history, heritage, and landscape. As a child, I grew up mesmerized by the blue dog. There is a hypnotic quality to the blue dog, those eyes that kind of lure you in and that mystique about it. So tell me about the origin of the blue dog.
So the blue dog actually started with an early Cajun legend called loup-garou. Loup-garou, crazy wolf, werewolf, almost a boogeyman type of character or myth. And it was a story George's mama told him when he was a little boy.
Wendy says George grew up in what we call today an artistic desert in his hometown of New Iberia, which at the time, museums, galleries, public art, and school art classes were not readily available. George discovered painting at the age of 8 while recovering from polio after his mom gave him a paint by numbers kit.
The very first painting that George Rorigue ever saw in his life was his own. Isn't that wild? Now, he didn't like the scene on the paint by number. You know what it was?
What?
When paint by number first came out, they only had one scene, and that was the Last Supper.
George attended what is now known as the University of Louisiana Lafayette and left before graduating to attend the Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles, only to discover it was a graduate program at the time.
And I don't know if it's still true or not, but at that time, George Rorigue was the only student they had ever accepted who did not have a degree. George came back to Louisiana and said, I'm going to do this at home. I want to capture Louisiana. That will be my subject. And so he came up with this idea to, well, as in the piece right here, to cut the tree off at the top. No one had ever done that consistently before in the American landscape painting. He changed American landscape painting, George did.
The blue dog didn't start out blue. He was gray with red eyes.
Blue was an artistic decision. He thought the night sky would cast that shade on its fur. He had changed the eyes to yellow, but it's in a very thick, goopy oil, so very intense, and no landscape. It was the first painting in 25 years that George had done that did not include a Louisiana landscape within it. That was big, and it was a real aha moment for him because he said he knew immediately that he had painted something exciting for him.
When George first introduced the blue dog, much of the art world didn't get it.
His friends hate it, his family hates it, the critics hate it, his collectors really hate it because they wanted what they already knew and the Cajun work. But George was very excited about it. He had pulled that nugget, that element out of the loup-garou and turned it into something else that he could use to express something completely different.
Over time, the blue dog gained international fame, showing up on canvases, prints, objects, Neiman Marcus catalog covers, even a custom-painted car for the department store, and a Steinway piano to raise funds for the LSU School of Music. Before we finished our tour, I had to ask a personal question that had perplexed me for years. Why is the blue dog red? Why is there a red version of the blue dog? What's up with that, Wendy?
You're going to hate this answer, Karen, because it can be anything that you need for it to be or want it to be. But something that George felt was missing was that dark side, which he enjoyed exploring that. I mean, let's face it, we're in the bayous and there's all kinds of, magic and wonderful mysticism that comes with being in Louisiana, right? And is so associated with it. So he liked that. So he thought, I know what I'll do. I'll have an alter ego for this blue dog. And that was the red dog. And that is how that began, was kind of as a way of still carrying on the loup-garou through this red dog. Now, over time, it became other things as well. He used it to express love, for example, in a whole series of paintings.
Wendy returns to the West Baton Rouge Museum in October to host free guided tours for area school children as part of her ongoing mission nationwide to inform and inspire future artists. She's also traveling around the state, sharing George's paintings with school children.
It's called the Life and Legacy Foundation, and I now have my status and to go national with it, and I hope to go eventually. I will go international with it also. And let's see, 137 schools, over 600 classes, and more than 60,000 kids later.
Establishing the Life and Legacy Foundation was Wendy's way of pulling herself from the depths of grief after her husband died of cancer. It was her way of finding purpose, a way forward, and keeping George's legacy alive. George Rodrigue is an LBB Louisiana legend, belonging to the ranks of the state's most beloved and accomplished icons. Between 1990 and 1993, George painted 16 portraits on 3 canvases of other LBB Louisiana legends. Today, his paintings are prized by collectors, and his joy of life, art, and altruistic efforts live on through his family, including the volunteer work of his widow, Wendy. To learn more about Wendy's work with school children, check out the Life and Legacy Foundation's website at www.legacyarttour.org. The George Rorigue exhibit, The River is the Road, runs through October 29th at the West Baton Rouge Museum. The artwork then travels for 2.5 years to Louisiana museums.